இங்கிலீஷ்லாம் இருக்குதும் நான் அதை தமிழும் கலந்து எனக்கு முடிஞ்ச அளவுக்கு செய்கிறேன். ஸோ ஏதாவது பிழைகள் இருந்தால் மன்னிக்கவும். ஸோ இன்றைக்கு நாங்கள் மொழியின் தோற்றத்தை பற்றி பேச இருக்கிறோம். ஸோ முதல் நான் கொஞ்சம் எப்படி மொழின்றது உருவாக்கப்பட்டது, அதுல இருந்து எப்படி அசைகளும் ஒலிகளும் தோன்றினதை பற்றி பேச இருக்கிறேன். அதுல இருந்து உயிர் ஒலிகளை பற்றியும் பேச இருக்கிறேன். My name is Damya Sandalnathan. I'm actually a high school teacher, so I'm a secondary educator. I have a background in the English language and literature. That's what I did for undergrad. And then I did some graduate research in anti-racism and decolonization studies as it relates to the education system. And currently I'm teaching using the Padimurai Tamil method to beginner Tamil language learners. So I'm very new to teaching Tamil, although I am an educator. This is very new to me, so I'm learning as I go as well. So first, நான் முதல்ல படிமுறை தமிழை பற்றி கொஞ்சம் பேச விரும்புகிறேன். So படிமுறை Tamil is a second language method developed by Mr. Subramaniam Rajaratnam, as you all know. And it focuses on teaching Tamil by means of sounds. So, ஒலிகளை வச்சு மொழியை எப்படி நாங்கள் பழகலாம், எப்படி முதல் மொழியா பழகலாம்ன்றது படிமுறை தமிழின் அடிப்படை. So it focuses on providing the basic foundations in Tamil by means of phonetics. So this method is indiscriminate, and what that means is that anybody can learn. You don't need to have any kind of background in Tamil. You don't need to speak it at home. You don't have to have parents. I teach a guy from France and a lady from Canada who have no knowledge of Tamil at all, and they're learning, have any background in Tamil, nor does it think that they might need to know any kind of foundation. It gives the students all the time that are needed in order to learn Tamil and be able to speak and read it as well. So that's the best thing about the Padimurai Tamil. I personally really enjoy it. I'm seeing a lot of growth in my students. So இந்த பிள்ளைகள் நான் படிப்பிக்கிற பிள்ளைகள் வந்து 9 வயசுல இருந்து 15 வயசு வரைக்கும் படிக்கணும். அவை படிக்கிற இந்த மெத்தட்ல படிக்கிறபடியே அவையால எழுத்து கூட்டி அசைகளை கூட்டி வாசிக்கிறதும் அது அந்த நாங்க படிக்கிற எழுத்துக்களா இருக்கட்டும் இல்லாட்டி வார்த்தைகளா இருக்கட்டும் அதை பிடிக்கிறதுக்கு வசதியா find பண்ணினோம் இது. So இன்றைக்கு நாங்க we're going to look at a few things. The first thing we're going to look at is grammar and linguistics, and then we're going to look at language as sounds and how we might want to look at and learn language as sounds. And then we're going to look at how sounds are formed, and then specifically Tamil sound or Tamil oligal, and then the differentiation in Tamil, so oli vagaipadu, and how உயிர் எழுத்துக்கள் or உயிர் sounds are formed. We're not going to spend too much time on main sounds. We're going to look at the basics, but we're going to focus more time on the uyir. So we're going to also look at how this method is good to allow Tamil language. I like to call them Tamil language learners, which is similar to what we use in the boards, in the school boards, English language learners, where we teach English as a second language. So this is a great method that replicates something similar to that, to teach Tamil to people who might not already know it. Okay, so Tamil, understanding Tamil between grammar and linguistics. So பழைய முறையின்படி படிப்பிக்கல நாங்கள் எங்களோட பிள்ளைகளுக்கு தமிழ் பேச முடியும் என்று நாங்கள் நினைச்சால் நாங்க ஃபோக்கஸ் வந்து இலக்கணத்தில ஃபோக்கஸ் பண்ணுவோம். ஸோ எப்படி இலக்கணத்தை படிப்பிக்கலாம், இருக்கிற அவைக்கு பேச முடியும்ன்றபடியா அந்த ரூல்ஸை சொல்லி கொடுக்கிறது, right? So grammar is a set of rules in a language that govern or dictate how words or change and combine to form meaningful texts in written forms, right? And this focuses on the study of words. But linguistics is a little bit different. So மொழியியல் focuses on how sounds form syllables and create meaning. So in order to understand the language, we look at the basic sounds that are formed and then create meaning based off of those sounds. The focus here is on the spoken language and the formation of sounds. So மொழியியல் is pretty much the manufacturing of sounds. தொல் அமைப்பு அடிப்படையில் படிக்கிறது தான் மொழியியல். So that's the foundation that Padimurai Tamil focuses on. So Padimurai Tamil uses this linguistic method to teach Tamil as a second language and not a first language, right? So that's the really, really important foundation for Padimurai Tamil. And learning in this way avoids assuming that all learners know how to speak Tamil. And basically, Moliyil focuses on teaching the basic sounds, creating syllables from those sounds, and then eventually creating words and sentences using the syllables that we learn, or aseka, right? It also allows the students to master vocabulary and reading skills as they learn these sounds, and it prevents spelling and grammatical errors in the future. I think even for me, when I was learning Tamil, while I spoke at home, I still to this day make spelling and grammar mistakes. And I think if I had learned in the linguistic method and learned how assays are formed, right? Asaygal எப்படி உருவாக்கப்படுது, எப்படி சில ஒலிகளை மற்ற ஒலிகளுக்கு பக்கத்துல வைக்க முடியாது, அந்த அடிப்படை ரூல்ஸ் எல்லாம் இந்த மெத்தட்ல நாங்க பழகுறோம். ஸோ பிள்ளைகளுக்கு வளர வளர வாசிக்க தொடங்கிக்கல, இப்போ சென்டென்சஸ் வாசிக்க தொடங்கிக்கல, இந்த எழுத்து பிள்ளைகள் விடுறதுக்கு வாய்ப்பு இருக்காது. ஏன்னா அவைக்கு ஆல்ரெடி விளங்கும் இந்த அசையை நாங்கள் சேர்க்கைக்குல இந்த எழுத்து இதுக்கு பக்கத்துல வராது, இந்த ஒலி இதுக்கு பக்கத்துல வராதுன்றதை நாங்க முதலே சொல்லி கொடுக்குறோம். ஸோ அந்த பிள்ளைகள் வர்றதுக்கு வாய்ப்பு இருக்காது. So let's look at language as sounds. So language is basically sounds, right? Moli என்பது ஒலியே, and that's what my uncle says all the time. So letters are a physical representation of the sounds that are formed. So even though நாங்கள் அந்த எழுத்தை சொல்லி கொடுக்கல, உண்மையா அந்த எழுத்து வந்து ஒரு ஒலியின் வரி வடிவம் ஒலிய அந்த ஒலிக்கு அதுதான் ரெப்ரசன்டேஷன் இல்லை. ஸோ முதல் நாங்கள் அந்த ஒலியை படிச்சுட்டு அதுக்கு பிறகு அதுக்கு வரி வடிவத்தை கொடுக்கறது தான் முக்கியம். அதுவும் யங்கர் பிள்ளைகளுக்கு அது வேலை முக்கியம். ஏன்னா அப்பதான் அவை அந்த ஒலியை சரியா படிப்பினா, பேசவும் பிள்ளைகள் விடாம பேசுவினா. So first, it's important to understand where those sounds and syllables are formed. And that's what we're going to look at today. So how are sounds formed in Tamil? So in Tamil, vowels or uyir oligal, and you're going to notice that I call them uyir oligal and not elithikal because it's not sounds. So in Tamil, vowels or uyir oligal are formed naturally through emotions and feelings. And this is something we've looked at. In previous presentations, other presenters have talked about how uyir oligal are unarchi purvama varadu, right? So we've already understood that. So I'm going to do a quick recap on that. So these natural sounds eventually form into communicative sounds. So we're going to look at some examples in the next slide, but basically think about uyir or vowels as natural sounds that are formed by humans in response to emotions or feelings, right? And then these emotions or feelings eventually evolved to create communicative language. So we are able to communicate these sounds and create meaning through those particular sounds to show emotions, to show thoughts, and to show ideas. And eventually, all of these sounds formed into a language that we speak to this day, right? So the spoken language was not necessarily born with humans, but rather it was developed over time, right? So மொழி பயிற்சி என்பது ஒரு வகையான ஒலி பயிற்சி என்பதை நாங்க தெரிஞ்சு கொண்டோம், right? So ஒலியில் இருந்து தான் நாங்க மொழியை ஃபார்ம் பண்ணி பேசுறோம். So it's important to understand how sounds are formed and truly understand what a language is. So how are sounds formed in Tamil? So initially the spoken language was only based on feelings or unarchi. And the spoken language was further shaped by adding the man-made consonants or may, or we might know it as may elithikal. I'm going to talk about it as may olihal. And then the visual representation or the very vadivam was given to these sounds as it became necessary to share this information. So as we had to share information, this was given, right? So you can look at the right of the screen on the PowerPoint. That's an old inscription on the wall. That's Tamil letters. And while they look similar to what we use today, it's not the same, right? However, the sounds have not changed to this day. We still use the same sounds, but the image for those sounds has changed over time as we develop the language, right? So that's important to understand. So the initial images or pictures that were used later became letters and were attributed to the different sounds that we speak. These visual representations continue to evolve over time, right? So that's, again, the language that was used 100 years ago, the letters that were used 100 years ago are not used today. So, okay, நான் முதல்ல மன்னிப்பு கேட்டுக்கொள்கிறேன். என்னடா நான் இது சரியா வாசிக்கிறேக்கல பிள்ளைகள் விடுறதுக்கு வாய்ப்பு இருக்கு. But this is தொல்காப்பியர், அவர் 83. I'm going to try my best to read it in Tamil, and then we're going to talk about it in English as well. உந்தி முதலா முந்து வழி தோன்றி தலையினும் மிடரினும் நெஞ்சினும் நிலை பல்லும் இதழும் நாவும் மூக்கும் அன்னமும் உள்பட எண்முறை நிலையான் உறுப்பு உற்று அமைய நெறிப்பட நாடி எல்லா எழுத்தும் சொல்லும் காலை பிறப்பின் ஆக்கம் வேறு வேறு இயல திறப்பட தெரியும் காட்சியான. So this is a Tolkappiyar's writing, and basically this is translated into English, and it represents how sounds are formed in Tamil. So it basically says speech sounds, so the olikal that we use, are produced when the air starts from the navel. So you take it in from your nose or your mouth, right? Usually your nose, and it's held in your chest, and then it's released through your throat and then your head. And this is modified by the action or actions of your teeth, your lips, the nose, and the palate or the roof of the mouth. So if you have taken any classes on understanding how sounds are formed, you already know this. But what he's saying is that first we take in the air in order to produce a sound. And we hold it in our chest and eventually release it through our throat, and then use our mouth and our nose to finally release the sound. And these sounds are affected by our teeth, lips, nose, and roof of mouth. These are the different things that stop the air in order to create different sounds. And we're going to look at what that looks like. Oh, and this was translated by A. Chandrasekhar in 1952. So this image here represents our sort of, it's the cross section of our face, and it shows the different urupukal that we're using in order to create sound, right? So if you follow my mouse down here, we take in the air in the chest and it's released through your throat here. And eventually it comes out through your mouth or your nasal cavity, and it's stopped by your tongue, your teeth, or the roof of your mouth in order to create sound. So you don't need to know everything on the screen, but it's mostly to give you an idea of how the sounds are created. So how are sounds formed? So Tolkappiyar mentions a couple of things. So he says that where the air forms to create the sounds, it's divided into 3 divisions, or he calls it mundra areikal. And each one has its own function. So they all work together in order to produce the sound, but each one has its own function. And the next thing he says is the bodily tools that are used to disrupt or stop the airflow in order to create the sounds, right? So உடம்புல இருக்கிற 3 அறைகள் இருந்து காற்று வந்து 3 காற்று அறைகள் இருந்து வெளியில வந்து ஒலியன்களாக நிப்பாட்டப்பட்டு வெளியில வருது ஒலி. So there are 5 different body parts that we're using. So we're going to look at that. I already mentioned it, but we're going to look at that in more detail. So மூன்று காற்றறைகள், or air cavity or air chambers in our body, are the chest, நெஞ்சு, the throat, மிடறு, and the head, தலை. So the air is first collected in the chest, right, in your நெஞ்சு, and then that's where it forms or appears. Then it's released and it vibrates or அதிர்வடைதல் within the throat, and then it's released through your head. And the head is represented by both the mouth and the nose. So that's really important. Tolkappiyar சொல்லிருக்கிறார், அங்கட தலை வந்து அங்கட இதழும் மூக்கும் சேர்ந்து தான் அந்த தலையை அவர் குறிச்சிருக்கிறார். So what that means is the air is released through either your mouth or your nose, and depending on where it's released, the sound changes. Now, how does the sound change? There are 5 olipangal that are used. So the tools that create these sounds, right? So the teeth, the pell, the idal, the lips or mouth, the naak, your tongue, your mook, your nose, and the annam, or your palate or roof of mouth. So these 5 urupukal play a role in changing the sound as they come out. So remember in Tamil, vowels or uyir, they're formed naturally, right? We talked a little bit about this by emotions and feelings. So இயற்கையாக பிறந்து தானாக இயங்கவும் இயக்கவும் உணர்வுகளை வெளிப்படுத்தவும் கூடிய ஒலிகளை உயிர் என்பனர். I would think I typed that wrong. So for instance, when we feel pain, we might say, when the pain is small, we might say ah, right? But then when the pain is much stronger, we say ah. And this denotes the kuril and nadil. And we've talked a lot about this in previous presentations, so I don't want to spend too much time. But we know this, right? The vowels are 5 sounds that are divided into short and long. So we end up with 10 different sounds. And we're going to look today at how those sounds are formed. The consonants are man-made, right? So they're செயற்கையானது. So na, annam, idal, pel, மூக்கு போன்ற ஒலிப்பான்களின் செயற்பாட்டால் செயற்கையாக பிறக்கும் ஒலிகள் மெய்யாகும். So that's how sounds are formed. So in Tamil, Tamil olikal, there are basically 28 oliyangal in Tamil. And so for those who don't know what oliyan means in English, it means phoneme. And it's basically a unit of sound that distinguishes one word from another. So basically, ஒரு ஒலி ஒரு வார்த்தையின் மீனிங்கை மாற்றுறது வந்து தான் ஒரு ஒலியன். So there are உயிரொலியன்கள் and மெய்யொலியன்கள். We're going to spend some time to look at what those are. But basically, it's something that changes the meaning of a word or a sound. So for example, we'll look at the vowels here. So we're looking at the 10 vowel phonemes, in Tamil. And here, for all the examples, they all have ut, u, or du as the common assay, right, or syllable. The only thing that changes these 10 words or sounds is the uirolian. So adu, adu, idu, idu, udu, udu, edu, edu. So these different vowels are changing the meaning while the du stays the same. So in this example, the oliyankal are a, I, u, and so on, right? So the second syllable again stays the same while the vowel changes. And it's the same thing for consonants, where the rest might change, but the consonant the consonant changes, but the rest of the word stays the same. And this changes the meaning completely, right? So in Tamil, there are 18 consonant phonemes, and I've listed them here. And so the first 5 example, for instance, the ku stays the same, but ik, it, up, and change the meaning of that word. So the first syllable changes the meaning. So how do we differentiate the sound, right? So oli vaheipadu. So sound differentiation and letters are formed as a result of the way we use our tongue, palate, lips, and mouth. And we talked about this, right? So our olipankal, those 5 different things, change the way sounds come out and are created. So to understand the pronunciation of the letters correctly, we need to understand the following. First, thondrumidam, so the birthplace of the sound. And usually this has to do with the tongue placement. And we also need to know what the muyachi parapu, or the effort, the use of the sound creation tools, or the olipankal, and the production of air, right? And the opening of the mouth. So these 2 things are very important. So the thondrumidam usually has to do with where the tongue is placed for the sound. So for vowels, because for vowels, there's no any kind of disruption, the tongue might change, however, the airflow is not stopped. Whereas for consonants, the airflow is stopped. So thondrumidam changes. And the thondrumidam changes for vowels as well. And we're going to look at how the tongue formation changes. However, the airflow is not stopped, right? And then the way we open our mouth or the production of sound through the nose. So for vowels, or uirolipangal, it's a speech sound made with your mouth fairly open and there's no blockage to air, right? So again, the tongue might change in order to create a different sound, and your mouth, your lips might change. However, the air comes out without any disruption. However, for the consonant, or மெய்யொலிப்பான்கள், the speech sound is made with your mouth fairly closed or some kind of blockage, right? So it might be your lips doing the blockage, it might be your tongue doing the blockage, whatever it is, or it might be a combination of your tongue and your palate, so your annam, creating that blockage, but there's some kind of blockage for consonants, whereas for vowels, there isn't. Today, we're going to look at the formation and differentiation for the 10 Tamil vowels, or uiroligal. So before we move into how the sounds are formed, we should look at the 3 different ways that your mouth would move in order to create those different sounds. So there are 3 ways that your mouth can form in order to differentiate sounds. So the first one is vertical, so it's spread vertically like this. So if you take a look at the middle image right here, your mouth will open wide, up and down. So this is called the neer nile position of your mouth. The second one is a neutral or natural state of your mouth. So it's usually your mouth doesn't have to move. It kind of stays where it is. It might stretch horizontally. So this position in Tamil is called Iyalbunile. And then number three is a rounded. So your mouth, it rounds itself. So it's a kuviyal nile. And I've given the examples here. I'm sure as you speak, you understand that your mouth changes, right? And for each of the 10 vowels, the mouth placement changes in order to create the sound. The important thing to remember with the mouth formation is that even though we're changing our mouth to either be vertical, neutral, or rounded, the creation of kuril and nadil is only done by the extending or nutti olikral, right? So it's based off of, for instance, for the short sound is made with your mouth fairly short open, so and then the long sound is made by opening your mouth wider, It's not made by keeping the mouth same and extending the sound. It's still the same sound, right? So it's important when we're teaching our students, and I found this very useful with my students in my first class, is that showing them, okay, we need to open our mouth wider. So whenever they make that mistake, for instance, for or when we're combining and making different syllable or asekal, I tell them, okay, this is a long sound. What do you have to do? Open your mouth wider. And they understand that differentiation. So that's really important. Instead of saying I'm teaching them that, okay, E is short open, E, you have to open your mouth wider. And we'll look a little bit at that, what that might look like. So let's take a look at our uir olikal or vowel sounds. So first, we're going to take a look at like I mentioned, for the tongue placement, and you can take a look at the image here, stays fairly low. So it doesn't move anywhere. And the air comes from your throat and is released through your mouth. So there's no blockage really at all. The tongue stays low. And you can when you try saying you'll notice that the tongue doesn't move. And your mouth is only slightly open. So you go However, this changes when we do the the nadil sound. So this is the kuril sound. When we do the nadil sound, the mouth needs to be open wider. And that's what creates the extended or longer sound. So again, this is called the neir nile for the mouth. So short open is and then the tongue stays the same. The air comes out and you extend your mouth wider to say right? And that's the difference between the two. This image here gives you an idea of what that looks like, right? So this is it's short, and you have to open your mouth wider. And this is a great way to explain it to students, I found, because they really understand how to differentiate between kuril and nadil sounds. When we look at E and E, this is called iyalbunile. So essentially, you're not moving your mouth up and down, it's horizontal. So for E, your mouth is its natural state. It stays in its natural state. The tongue moves a little bit higher above. So you can see that the tongue is now moving closer to the roof of your mouth, but it's not blocking anything. So the air is still able to come through without any blockage. Remember, for vowels, there's no blockage of sound. So the air should be able to flow freely. So for your tongue is at the bottom. For E, your tongue is now going up. However, the air is coming through and your mouth stays straight. And then when you're saying the nadil sound, E, and you'll notice what you're almost like smiling, right? You're opening your mouth wider horizontally, keeping the tongue the same. It's still higher up near towards your roof. For U and U, the sound is to do with your lips. So now your lips are creating an O sound or an O shape, right? And kuvia nile in order to create the U sound. Now it's interesting, in order to create the nadil sound U, you're not necessarily extending the sound itself. You're actually almost making your lips go out further. So in order to show students, what you can do is, it's almost like a kissing look, right? So you go ooh, and then when you're going ooh, you really have to extend your lips further. So the work is being done a lot by the lips here, but also you can take a look at the way the tongue is. The back of your tongue is a little bit higher and the tip of your tongue is lower in the front of your mouth. However, the airflow, again, because it's a vowel, does not get blocked. So the air is able to move freely out from the mouth, where the tongue placement now changes. The tongue placement is actually pretty important. We're going to look at the last slide as to why this tongue placement is important, especially when it comes to writing and writing poetry and song. So that's for U and U. Now we're going to look at A and A. So A and A, the mouth is doing a little bit more of the work, and the airflow is coming from your mouth. The tongue is back down here, right? So the back of your tongue is lower, the tip of your tongue is closer to your lips. Again, no blockage, and your mouth is moving, opening wider. So A, in order to create the sound. Yeah, so the short and long sounds are created again by the movement of your mouth, right? So you're not necessarily extending the sound, it's the movement of your mouth. And this is the same for all the vowel sounds. And we're gonna look at the last couple as well. So O and O, again, we're rounding our mouth. The tongue is a little bit lower. It's not as high as it was for U. And again, airflow is not blocked. For O, you're creating the shorter circle, and then for O, you're extending it further in order to create, you're physically extending your lips further in order to create the longer sound, O. So that's sort of the formation of the uyir oli olikhal. It has to do with, again, the placement of your tongue and the way that you form your lips in order to create that sound. Now, I did mention earlier that, or just now, that the tongue placement is really important. So this image shows you where each of the sounds are formed. So for the tongue placement is lower in your mouth, right? For A, it goes higher. For E, it's higher. So this represents the tip of your mouth. For O, it's at the back. For O, it's at the back in the middle. And for U, it's all the way at the top. And this image is really important because what it shows us is the connection between these letters, especially when we are writing poetry or music and creating rhyme. So for instance, E and A may work together in poetry. So I think the one example that comes to mind, for instance, for anbe aruire, right? That's an example. And the rhyming comes from the placement of the two sounds. Can work with A or E to create rhyming sounds as well. Oops. In ise, I'm trying to come up with examples that I can't think of. I wrote them down. I don't have them here. But the placement of these tongues and the location of the sound allows you to create இனிமையான ஒலி, லைக் ஒரு கவிதை எழுதிக்கல அந்த இனிமையாக ஒலிக்கிறதுக்காக அந்த இந்த அடிப்படையின்படி நாங்கள் எழுதினோம்டா அந்த ஒலிக்கிற லைக் எழுதுற போய்ட்ரியா இருக்கட்டும் பாட்டா இருக்கட்டும் ரைம் பண்ணும். ஸோ அந்த ஓசை நல்லா இருக்கும் கேட்கறதுக்காக. So that's really important in understanding where the placement of the sounds are and understanding where the sounds are coming from. Okay, so that's sort of my presentation today. எல்லாரும் கேட்டதுக்கு நன்றி. I hope I did a good job in explaining the sounds and the formation of Tamil, and also understanding why it's important to know and learn in this method for our future students to understand Tamil. If there's any questions, I can try to answer them to the best of my knowledge, or if there's any feedback that you would like to share, I'd appreciate it.
Amla here from Toronto.
Hi.
Your presentation was very useful as a teacher, and it was need-based to the audience that we are going to face. So, என்னென்னா தமிழ் தெரிஞ்சாக்களுக்கு இந்த முறையை மட்டும் மாற்றுறது அது வேறு ஸ்ட்ராட்டஜி. ஒன்றுமே தெரியாத ஆட்களுக்கு இதை இன்ட்ரடியூஸ் பண்ண வேணுமெண்டா நாங்கள் அவைகளுக்கு தெரிஞ்ச ஒரு லாங்குவேஜ் மூலமாகவும் இந்த டெக்னிக்காலிட்டிஸ் மூலமாகவும் தான் we can reach them and help them. Otherwise they'll be lost. ஸோ அந்த இலகுப்படுத்தலை நீங்கள் வடிவாக செய்திருக்கிறீங்க. இங்கிலீஷ்லேயும் தமிழ்லையும் அதை சேர்த்து செய்கிறது, அதுக்குரிய வேர்ட்ஸை கொடுக்க தான். எனக்கு தெரிஞ்ச ஒரு மொழியில் வர அதே ரூல்ஸில் என்ன சேம், என்ன வித்தியாசம், என்ன அடிப்படைகள் என்றதை எல்லாரும் புரிஞ்சு கொள்ளக்கூடியதாக செய்திங்கம்மா. Well done as a teacher and as a learner of Tamil and teacher of Tamil. I greatly appreciate that you have catered for the audience that we are going to reach out now. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well done. Congratulations.
Kamia, well done. You done a great job. I think some of my students also watch this. They are here. பார்த்து கொண்டிருந்தவ. ஸோ நான் அவையில கேட்டிருந்தேன். நான் இன்றைக்கு வந்தொருக்கா பார்த்து அவையிலும் இந்த ஃபியூச்சர் எனக்கு எங்களோட ஸ்கூலுக்கும் இங்கே லண்டன்லேயும் வந்து we need young teachers like you all. ஸோ என்னென்னால் எங்களுக்கு நாங்களே நடுக பழையாக்கள் தமிழ் கற்பித்து கொண்டிருக்கிறத விட so we need more younger blood to come into this. So that's the best part. Even I always suggest to make go near to their heart. We need to talk and explain something in English. ஆங்கிலத்தின் மூலம் தமிழை கற்பிப்பது இங்குள்ள பிள்ளைகளுக்கு இரண்டாம் மொழியாக தமிழை கற்றுக்கொள்ளும் பிள்ளைகளுக்கு மிகவும் இலகுவாக இருக்கின்றது. அந்த முறையில் உங்களுடைய இந்த the way you created this PowerPoint presentation is fantastic. மிக அழகாக மிக நேர்த்தியாக அதை செய்திருந்தீர்கள். மிகவும் நன்றி. ஒரு கொஞ்சம் தான் செய்திருந்த நீங்க, பட் in the future we can see more of this. முக்கியமா நான் ராஜரட்னம் நாட்டை கேட்க விரும்புறது, எல்லா கிளாஸஸும் நீங்க பிள்ளைகளை இந்த ஆரம்பத்தை மட்டும்தான் செய்ய சொல்றீங்க. we need to go further into that. கொஞ்சம் டீப்பா உள்ளுக்குள்ள போய் ஒரு கொஞ்சம் பழைய பிள்ளைகளுக்கு அப்படி படிப்பிக்கணும், அதேலுக்குள்ள எங்க போயிருக்கணும் என்றதையும் நீங்கள் சொல்லும் பொழுது அதை புதிதாக வந்து பார்க்கின்ற எங்கள் குழந்தைகள் கூட அதை கற்றுக்கொள்வதற்கும் ஆர்வம் காட்டுவதற்கும் இலகுவாக இருக்கும். So we expect in the future classes there will be some more deeper lessons in Tamil. முக்கியமாக எங்களுடைய இந்த பாரம்பரிய முறைகளை நாங்கள் தமிழாசிரியர்கள் அங்கு 30 பேர் முன்னுக்கு இருப்பினும் முன்னுக்கு ஒரு ஆள் நின்று அசையாம கதிரையில இருந்தபடி கையில் ஒரு பிரம்பையும் வச்சு சொல்லிக் கொடுக்குற முறையில இருந்து இன்றைக்கு எவ்வளவோ மாறிக்கொண்டு வந்துட்டது. நிறையவே வித்தியாசமான மொழிகளை கற்பிப்பதற்குரிய வழிகள் மாறி இருக்கின்றன. ஸோ வெல் டன். அது தொடர்பாக இங்கும் நிறைய ஆய்வுகள் செய்து கொண்டிருக்கிறோம். ஹவு டு டீச் த செகண்ட் லாங்குவேஜ் என்பது தொடர்பாக. முக்கியமாக அந்த பிள்ளைக்கு தமியா கங்க்ராச்சுலேஷன்ஸ், எங்களுடைய மனப்பூர்வமான வாழ்த்துகள். நீங்கள் தொடர்ச்சியாக இந்த கற்பித்தலில் பங்கு கொண்டு மிகச் சிறந்த ஒரு தமிழாசிரியையாக எதிர்காலத்தில் வர வேண்டும் என்று வாழ்த்துகிறேன். நன்றி.
நீங்கள் முன்னுக்கு ஆரம்பத்துல குழப்பங்கள் இருந்த மாதிரி எனக்கு தெரியல. ஏன்னா உங்களோட மனதுல உறுதியான இதுக்குதான் நான் பாராட்டுறேன். உறுதியா இருந்தேன், ஒரு விதமான கலக்கமோ ஒன்றும் இல்லை, எனக்கு அது தெரியல. இப்பதான் நான் பார்த்தேன் வடிவா இருந்தது. அதாவது எந்த சூழ்நிலையிலும் நாங்கள் சமாளிச்சு கொள்ற ஒரு திறமை இருக்கு, அதை நீர் திறமா காட்டினீங்க. இந்த முகத்திலே எது விதமான மாற்றத்தை நான் பார்க்கல. அப்படியே இருந்தது, மாஸ்டர் இல்லையே ஒன்றும் இல்லை, கிளீனர். அதெல்லாம் நான் நல்லா பாராட்டுறேன். மற்றது சொன்னிருந்த மொழி வந்து எங்களுக்கு பேர ஒலிதான் மொழி என்னதான் ஆணித்தரமா சொல்லி அதுல படம் எல்லாம் எடுத்து காட்டி பழைய எழுத்துக்கள் எல்லாம் மடியா எடுத்து காட்டி இருக்குது. உண்மையில பாராட்டுகள். ஒரு கொஞ்சம் விஷயமா இருந்தாலும் உயிரெழுத்தை மட்டும்தான் அறிமுகப்படுத்தி இருக்கிறீர், அது கூட எங்களோட மனதில ஆணித்தரமா பதுங்கியிருக்கு. நன்றி. உங்களுடைய சேவை மேலோங்குக. நீர் ஒரு சிறந்த ஆசிரியர் மட்டுமில்லை, இனி இல்லை எல்லா மொழியிலும் நீர் இப்ப கற்பிச்சு கொண்டிருக்கிற ஆங்கில மொழியா இருக்கட்டும், இந்த தமிழ் மொழியா இருக்கட்டும், இதுல நீர் சிறந்த ஆசிரியா இயல்வீர் என்று நான் நம்புறேன். உங்களுக்கு வாழ்த்துக்கள், என்னுடைய வாழ்த்து.
Yeah, I just want to say a few things, Tamia.
Yeah.
So எல்லாருக்கும் Tamia in the City Academy la ஒரு class படிக்கிறவா. So Tamia is a very popular teacher. So எல்லாருக்கும் Tamia வேணும் என்று கேட்டு parents kids எல்லாம் join பண்ணின எல்லாரும் நல்லா படிக்கணும். So she's doing an amazing job. So thank you, Tamia. I just want to take this opportunity to thank you.
Okay, நன்றி எல்லாருக்கும் வந்ததுக்கு.
Thank you, Tamia.